Thank you for attending this session. I will talk about how I incorporate web-based simulation game into my course of operations management. In my course, the first day of classes is not about syllabus, it's mainly about forming teams. And I use these games to motivate students to form teams as soon as possible. But these teams are not formed only to play the game. Game is a tool to motivate students to do group study. So that is one objective. I try to have satellite micro campuses that students themselves sit somewhere and watch my material and go through the assignments that I have provided them, both with the assignment and solution. The student need to involve in the game because we have game in exams and in quizzes. The main idea is to have teams and also to develop intra-team relationships, which I really think are very important takeaway that the student take. I usually tell them, look, I and my tutor are not here during your next 80 years of life, but you can have a network and you can communicate with them, help them and get help from them. Therefore, they form teams and they try to form clusters. I hope that they take these teams and these clusters to their next classes. So this is the interface of the game. Orders come in. Each order requires 60 pieces of raw material. And then they go to station 1, then they go to station 2, station 3, back to station 2, and then they leave the system. Here I explain how we benefit from this game to practice forecasting. I click on here, the specifications of orders come in. Each order needs 60 pieces of raw material. Each order is placed on one machine and the machine is busy until the order is completed. We need to deliver the order in 1 day. If we deliver it in 1 day, we collect $1,000, and if it takes 3 days or more, zero, and the $1,000 linearly reduces from 1 day to 3 days. Students have capabilities to play with work in process. If they feel that the number of flow units inside the system is too much compared to the capacity of their bottleneck, then they limit the orders to reach a specific flow time. I click on job arrivals here. This shows me the plot of job arrivals, how many jobs per day, and then I can click on this and download the data into an Excel sheet, and I can practice different moving average periods. The lecture is also available inside the Excel sheet. Examine 2-period moving average, 10-period moving average, 20-period moving average, 3-period moving average to find it out which one is the best fit for this data based on math or based on mean square error. We also provide tracking signal. I also go through how to draw tracking signal graphs. And for the game, the teams will feel more comfortable if they have a graph also accompanied with the data. Some observation, for example, here we realize that the gap between actual and forecast is increasing over time. So we realize that our forecast is underestimating the demand. And then in a nice, neat class discussion, we talk about how to improve this. And then we realize that, okay, we need to shift our forecast a little bit up. And then students say, oh, then it will not be a moving average. Say that would be a moving average plus us. We have two groups of students, contributors. They will learn the material and they implement it in the game. Unfortunately, we always have some free riders that will not touch the material unless they also are in the exams. Here is a quiz that I generate for moving average. As usual, I have instances of each problem. This is a moving average. Each problem having 50 pieces of data, which will be delivered using an Excel file that I attach to each quiz. And then here it says how many period moving average. These are randomly generated between two upper and lower bound. And then here are the forecasts based on those moving averages. Here are forecasts. Here is the deviation between actual and forecast for 50 periods of 26 instances of this problem. Here is the absolute value of the gap. Here is the square of the gap, because among the questions we have both MAD and MSE. So here are MAD computations for every month of each of those instances. Here are MSE computations. Here are some of the forecast errors, and tracking signal is some of the errors divided by MAD. I produce several questions: forecast for next period, MAD in the last period, standard deviation of the forecast based on MAD, tracking signal, mean square error, and standard deviation of forecast for next period using mean squared error. Transpose this data here using some functions, match and index functions, and then I import them here, and this is an instance of generating 26 problems of a specific type. As soon as I change this one, for example, to 20, numbers are changed, the Excel file is changed, and everything is changed. Copy this all. I go to the generator. I have written a macro here, Control R. This information is generated for these problems. This is an Excel file with a lot of spaces that no one can remove them because they are not just one single type of space. In LaTeX, we don't differentiate different types of spaces. So I copy this. I'll take it to a LaTeX file. I paste it over there. I will save it and then run. Then this file is generated. Yes, a PDF is generated, and I export it to Word. And now I have this file. It contains 26 problems. So like this, a little strange things, but they are all understandable by Canvas. And I see it like this in Canvas. Canvas doesn't have multiple choice, but I have used the fill the blanks, but I have used it like multiple choice. So student open this file and then do their computations. But here they don't enter the numbers. They enter one of these 5 letters in each place. And that's it. So here is the problem in Canvas. Here are the questions, 6 questions on moving average, MAD, tracking signal, mean square error, and so on and so forth. The same happens for exponential smoothing. Lecture is recorded, and here also MAD for a specific alpha given to them, compute standard deviation of forecast, compute forecast for the next period, and then also they use a solver to find the optimal alpha. But in order to motivate them to also learn to solve situations when solver is trapped into local optimal and cannot find the best solution, they also learn how to use data table and then how to change the ranges and make it smaller and smaller such that they can get more or less the same solution as solver would have got if it was not trapped into the local optima. Then we go to regression, ask them to use Excel functions, not data analytics tool. Excel functions to compute intercept and slope, to report the line, to compute R-square, to compute standard error of data, to compute standard error of forecast, and to understand what is the difference between a standard error of data and standard error of forecast, and compute the probability, for example, that the demand in next period exceeds a specific value. There is another game which has a very neat situation, which is the application of regression into two instances when the students really can capture not only the forecasting nature of regression, but also the associative nature of regression. In this game, they will produce a product and they put a price on it. This is price, this is quantity sold, and then they also compute how much cost they had to produce that quantity, and they set a lower price next time, compute how much they have sold, and then compute the cost of producing that quantity, and they repeat this experiment. So the top one, the blue one, is demand curve, and the bottom one is total cost curve. And then the students will use these data to come out with the what is the maximal price they can set, what is the maximal quantity that they can sell, and what is the fixed cost and what is the variable cost. These are very neat understanding, and in these computations they even don't need to solve one equation, one unknown. I have passed everything to Excel and solve it. We also learned what is the meaning of R square, what is the meaning of coefficient of determination, and we learned that, for example, a negative coefficient of determination, which is close to -1, would be better than a positive coefficient of determination, which is close to 0. And then the student go through different Excel exercises to compute what quantity maximizes their revenue, what quantity maximizes their profit, and what are the two nonlinear break-even points. And if the class has capability, I will also talk about the relationship between linear demand curve and uniform distribution to set the stage for understanding other continuous distributions. This is a recorded lecture on that. And then we go to the process flow analysis and the Liddell's law. We have the incoming data and we compute the completed jobs and we download it. Now I have input and I have output, and therefore using input and output I can compute end of period inventory. This is a very nice situation to help the student how throughput is computed, how inventory is computed, and how flow time is computed, and why computing inventory and throughput is cheaper than computing flow time. And therefore, we go for those two, and then we use those two to estimate the flow time. As I said, I don't use data analysis. I mainly use Excel functions. Here are the descriptive statistics using Excel functions, and based on the Liddell's law, throughput times flow time is equal to inventory, and therefore flow time is inventory divided by throughput. And before the game starts, they know if they need to make a decision as soon as the game starts or not. Then here we have capacity. We go to each station. We click on utilization, plot utilization, and download utilization. And therefore, we have utilization of all stations. We also download incoming orders and completed orders. Then we have a table like this. We can easily go ahead and compute average of everything, average of utilization, average of inventory, average of output, if we may assume it as throughput, and average of input. We have got a little bit discussion here because input and output are more or less close to each other. We can apply the Liddell's law, and we can also assume that output is the throughput. And then we have throughput, you have utilization, and you have the equations of what is the relationship between utilization, throughput, and capacity, and therefore the students will be able to estimate capacity. Then I asked them, for example, capacity of this one is 5.61 per day. I will ask them, suppose 11 products are waiting here. How long does it take to pass them through this station? I will drop your lowest quiz if you answer my question. We always have 2 quizzes per week. I mean, almost always. One is before class, in which the student watch my lecture and take a quiz on Canvas, which is quite simple. I just want to make sure that the student has watched the lecture, and then after that they come to class. I will go through some problems, some aspects of the game, and then they go home and take a second quiz, which is not very simple. The first one is very simple, just to check if the student has watched the lecture. And frankly, I have found these weekly quizzes have profound impact on student performance. Indeed, I have also experienced that performance in quizzes is a better predictor of the performance of the student compared to his grand GPA, which is well known to be a good predictor. When I say I drop the lowest quiz, and if I have 11 here, the student usually say 2 days, but it takes 1 day because the capacity of 5.5, it can complete product, 5.5 product, but each product passes this station twice. So if I have 11 over there, it doesn't take 2 days to pass them, it just takes 1 day. And then we have a quiz on this subject too. Students should answer many questions. And then we go to inventory. Let's move a little bit forward and talk about a little bit about revenue management and then EOQ, ROP, and news vendor problem. First, click here to have some idea about my orders. As you see in this part of the game, when the game starts, we are on a contract for $750. We need to deliver it in less than 7 days. If it goes beyond 14 days, we collect nothing. Between 7 and 14, our revenue reduces linearly. Other things are the same as our previous discussion. Edit data, and we see that we have 3 types of contract, and they are time-sensitive contracts. In our more lucrative contract, we need to deliver the product in less than half a day, then we will collect $12.50. But if we deliver it in more than 1 day, we collect nothing. In the second type of the contract, if we deliver it in less than 1 day, we collect $1,000. But beyond 3 days, we collect nothing. And in the current contract, if we deliver it in less than 7 days, we collect $750. And if we deliver it after 14 days, we collect nothing. Then let's go to our inventory. Currently, we order 7,200 each times, which is equivalent to 120 orders. And our reorder point is when inventory reaches 24 batches. Lead time is 4 days. Ordering cost $1,000. Unit cost, as before, $10. Then we plot the inventory. It seems our reorder point is a little bit low. We get out of stock frequently indeed. And of course, we can change the reorder point and we can change the ordering quantity. It seems the difficulty right now is due to reorder point. We didn't talk about why inventory is not good. I mean, more than what is needed, inventory is not good. Otherwise, we know that we need to have 3 types of inventory throughout of all processes. That is, when product waits, that's what we usually call it inventory. When capacity waits, safety capacity, which is important in this course, and when the customer waits, when the customer send an order and they need to wait, Perhaps in the first 50 days of the game, they should have waited because in some times we were out of stock. And then we talk about obsolescence cost, physical cost, and we talk about financial cost. In the game, we only have financial cost, which is mainly cost of capital. And here is another neat problem that we can formulate. Find the points in the game that we can deliver some concepts. Here I click on cash. What was the situation with my cash in the first 50 days of the game? Starting cash was $1 million. I had this much revenue and this much interest. I have spent this much money on inventory, and my final cash is this. And then I try to plot the cash. Goes up because I sell product and I also collect interest, and it comes down because I purchase inventory. And then I download the Excel file and I plot it. It looks like this. And then now I ask the student to estimate H for their inventory model. And I have already said that in the game, we do not have obsolescence cost. Indeed, obsolescence cost will be considered at the very end of the game. During the game, we don't have obsolescence cost, we don't have physical cost, and all the costs that form H, carrying cost of inventory, is financial cost, and the student need to use this data and estimate what is H. The student may connect the starting point to the ending point and compute the average. They have the average and the interest they have it, so they can compute the interest rate for 50 days, and then they can turn it into yearly interest rate, which is something between 9 and 10%. Alternatively, they can use regression to fit a regression line to this data. Again, they can have the intercept and they have the slope. They can compute this point. Based on at that point, they can compute the average cash they have had. Interest is the same. Then they can compute the interest in 50 days, yearly interest rate, and they can adjust this. They can recompute this during the game, and therefore they find it out that the interest rate is 10%, and each order requires 60 kits. Cost of each kit is $10, therefore it is $600. 10% of $600 is $60 per year. Another question that students bring up in this point is, we play the game for 50 days. Then for these 7 times 24 hours in our life, which is 7 times 24 days in the game's life, which is 168. And then at the end, when students will be disabled of making any changes, the game will continue for 50 more days. And therefore, the game is running for 50 plus 168 plus 50, 268 days. Then what we can do, because demand is for 1 year, but we are not producing for 1 year. And then we go through a discussion in the class, a neat discussion that, look, H and R or D are depending on each other. If I represent demand or throughput per year, then H should be in year, no matter if we play the game 268 days or 365. That demand should be for 365 days, then H is $60. However, at the same time, we can use demand for 1 month, but H in that case is 60 divided by 12. Or we can use demand for 1 day. In that case, H is 60 divided by 365. The student really don't know it unless we discuss it. We finally agree that we need to estimate the demand for 1 month and use H for 1 month, while S will not change. S, no matter if we use demand for 1 year or for 1 month, is $1,000 because it is per order. And then compute EOQ, and dynamically over 7 days that we play the game, we update the monthly demand, and therefore we update EOQ, and we update standard deviation of the demand, and therefore we update ROP. For example, at the beginning of the game, using these data, EOQ is enough for 20 days, a cycle of 20 days. Then we need to compute reorder point. Reorder point throughout the game is not an issue. You can set up your service level equal to 99, 99 and a half, because even if you order more than what you need, the cost is very small because you will consume it. You will postpone your next reorder point. And overage cost is quite small compared to underage cost. Underage cost depends on what contract you are, could be 150, 400, or 650. Even 150 is much more than keeping additional inventory for 1 month, which costs you $5 per unit. But the story is entirely different at the end of the game. At the end of the game, if you have not sold your machines, their sales price is zero. If you have not sold your inventory worth nothing. Therefore, now, at the last 50 days of the game, the overage cost is $600, while the underage cost, even if you are on the highest contract, underage cost is $650. So you either have your reorder point, your last order, either close to the average demand during that 50 days, or a little bit more than that, or somehow less than that, but not 90% or 95% service level. Here we also explain what is the difference between two formulas that they use, because they usually ask why one of these two formulas, ROP, has square root, the other doesn't have. And then I will explain to them that their nature is different. In one case, several random variables are added to each other, and in another case, a single random variable of lead time is multiplied by a constant. Then we talk about news vendor problem. 10 years ago, I would have proved news vendor formula in class. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I just would have explained the formula. But it is 3-4 years that I will go through a neat graphical representation. We start with, look, there are two forces, underage cost and overage cost. Underage cost is this blue, overage cost is this red. One wants you to take you in one direction, the other in the other direction. If they are equal, we stay in between, and we order average demand during lead time. But if one of them is stronger than the other one, that it will take us to its direction, and we need to stay with a larger service level.